with Jane Velez Mitchell, HLN host of Jane Velez Mitchell. I also have Lisa Bloom, attorney and author of Think. And also I've got Boyce Watkins at Syracuse University, a liberal commentator. Boyce, my first question is to you. Do you feel that justice has been served finally?
I think that we've begun to serve justice. I think that this was an important step in the right direction. I think that it says that there are people who are concerned with making sure the right thing gets done. It's a little unfortunate that they had to go outside of the system to sort of make these things happen. They're still within the broader system, but not within the Sanford system. I think that there's still a lot of information forthcoming. I think that in about 3 months, we'll know for sure whether or not justice was actually served or whether or not some of this is a deflection, because I think there are many deeper issues to go into on this case.
Well, there are indeed. Lisa, you're shaking your head. Yes, there's lots of issues.
You know, here's my take. The criminal justice system is a cleanup crew. It comes in after there's been a disaster and tries to do something to make it right. But nothing's going to bring back Trayvon Martin. And the real underlying issues have to be addressed to prevent future killings like this. I'm not using the word murder because we don't know yet if it's murder.
We can use
right?
the word murder.
No, we can't, because that's for a jury to decide.
It is for a jury.
But we know it's a killing. You can use that word, or a homicide, right?
What are the issues? You're talking about race. Are we talking about race issues?
We have way too many guns in this country, and we've talked about that. We have far more than any other first world country. We have racial fear in this country, so that people like George Zimmerman apparently can see an African American in a community where he's not supposed to be, quote unquote, and get afraid and get nervous and perhaps take out a gun and kill him. That may be what happened here. I mean, that's really the problem, is the fear and too many guns and the sense of vigilantism and the stand your ground laws. If those underlying conditions don't change, we're going to continue to see more cases like this.
And Jane, you're shaking your head. I mean, that's why it's important to have these conversations.
Absolutely. You know, there's a 12-step saying, you're only as sick as your secrets. And I think there are a lot of cultural secrets that have been revealed throughout this entire drama.
Well said.
And it's a really healthy dialogue. Let's keep it healthy. If it becomes hateful, then I think it takes a turn for the worse. It's all about intention. What is our intention in examining this terrible tragedy? Is it to heal? Is it to heal racial differences? Is it to have a dialectic where we have a better understanding of each other? If so, that's great. But if it's something that encourages hate, then it is not a positive. The most important thing, I think everybody would agree, is that Trayvon Martin did not die in vain. If we can learn from this crisis to avoid it again in the future, if we can get the stand your ground law, which exists in many states, repealed, if we can do something about our gun culture and our Wild West mentality, that I think then would say that Trayvon Martin has not died in vain.
So we're trying to have a healthy conversation. I'm trying to keep this conversation alive that moves us forward. Boyce, my question, though, to you is, even in having this conversation, I get a lot of feedback in social media and whatnot that media is creating a frenzy and that African-American leaders are taking advantage and exploiting this. What do you say to people that respond that way to this conversation?
Well, I would say that racism is really something that's wired into the fabric of our very society. So there's almost nothing that a civil rights leader can say that won't lead to some portion of the population defining that person to be a troublemaker. Dr. King went through the same thing when he fought for things that many of us agree that he should have been fighting for. There was a recent poll in which they said that 30% of Americans believe that Zimmerman should not have been charged with anything. And I couldn't understand that, because it's clear that he should have been charged. And I think that where the broader issue here is number one, we have to remember Trayvon Martin is one person. George Zimmerman's one person. They are both symbols of broader issues. The prison industrial complex, all the black men that are in prison right now for incidents that were clearly self-defense. The fact that the police didn't investigate thoroughly because the life of a black male is worth almost nothing in America. There are so many black kids that have died since Trayvon. So I think at the end of the day, just talking about it and feeling a little bit better isn't going to solve the problem. We got to dig deeper into the system that creates these sorts of situations in the first place.
I agree with that. We do have a culture of mass incarceration, and it disproportionately harms African Americans. And while both of these men are symbols, this is a criminal justice case, and now we have to have fairness for George Zimmerman. He has to be presumed innocent. We have to hear all of the evidence, and not just what we hear in the media, not just bits and pieces of what people's lawyers and friends are saying, not being cross-examined by a skilled defense attorney. I think we really have to hear this thing out and not rush to judgment.
Why can't we have opinions? We're just the media. We're just speculating.
Well, we can have opinions, but a man's liberty is on the line.
No, it isn't. We're not going to affect his liberty, are we? If we
you don't think the media affects these cases? I think it does.
Well, if they do, then the justice system isn't working then, if that's the case.
We can talk about them, but we can't reach conclusions before the jury does. We can't call a man guilty in the media.
I'm not saying he's guilty, but it just looks like something bad happened to me. But
are you going to be able to prove a depraved mind? I don't know how they're going to be able to prove that, frankly, because there is this gap. And there's nothing that we've heard necessarily up until this point that can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he had a depraved mind. And that gap is such a murky, murky piece of territory. Those couple of minutes where nobody knows exactly what happened. People were seeing it through their windows. How far away in a rainy night?
Sorry, Jane, got to interrupt.
The prosecutor has to have more information.
We're going to have more of this conversation going about George Zimmerman and his second-degree murder charge after this. Stay with us.
Your heart, because a heart has no color. It's not black, it's not white, it's red. And I want to say thank you from my heart to your heart.
She seems like a lovely lady, and that poor woman has got to get, once all this settles down, grief is going to be the name of the game for that family. George Zimmerman has been charged with second-degree murder in the shooting death of Trayvon Martin. It has been an emotional evening for his family and others. Jane, did anyone win tonight?
I think it's too early to tell. I think it was really wonderful that people in America essentially said they were not satisfied with a local cop saying, nothing to see here. Yeah. Nothing to see here. Go on your way. And people took to the streets and they marched and they said, no, there is something to see here. So we're not at the end of this, what I call Shakespearean tragedy. Act one, and not to in any way make light of it, but just to give it a structure. Act one was the tragedy itself, the killing. This is Act two. And now Act 3 is going to be the trial itself and how that plays out. But I do think that this speaks wonders to what Americans can accomplish and the fact that we have the freedom in this country, when we don't like something, to gather peacefully and say, that's not going to cut it.
Boyce, are you encouraged by this? I kind of feel like this is still the working through of our history as a country, and we're doing it so far, I think, in a productive way. Do you disagree?
I think that we can be productive. I think that we can give our country a lot of credit for the progress that we've made. But I think we also have to be realistic about the progress that we have not made. We are not a post-racial society. If you look at any major event that's involved race over the last 15 years, the O.J. trial, Henry Louis Gates, this case, and you do polls among whites and blacks, you always find a very different set of realities between the two groups. So I think that what this case really does is it gives us an opportunity to educate and to communicate and hopefully eventually legislate our way past some of the damage that's been done in the past when it comes to our really sick racial history. So let's see how it works out. But I want fairness for George Zimmerman. Let's make that clear. Yeah. But we have bigger fish to fry beyond that.
Yeah. We all do, but the sick racial history is the interesting point here. And Lisa, I've got about a minute. I'm going to give you a last comment here. And that is, when I listen to some of the non-American commentators, like I'm fascinated Pierce interviewing people from this tragedy, because this is a deep thing in our soul, and Europeans look at it, they don't quite get it. They're not quite affected the same way we are as Americans are.
Well, Boyce is very right. We've had a long and troubled history with racial hostility in this country, and it is clearly not over. When you look at the rates of incarceration of African-American men, for example, the fact that the majority of our African-American boys drop out of high school, the majority, and we never talk about that. I mean, there are some serious issues in this country, and one of the biggest ones is the relationship between the African-American community and the police. The fact that the police in that community were so quick to dismiss this because it was an African-American victim, and the perpetrator said it was self-defense, and the police essentially said, well, okay, we don't need to hear anything more. That's appalling.
20 seconds.
I just hope this case doesn't harden any divides. I hope it heals and brings people together. That's the key.
That is the key here, and that's why first of all, I think we should all express ourselves. We should all continue this conversation. I think when we point fingers at other people and say they're exploiting this, I think they're doing this conversation a great disservice. I think Boyce is absolutely right. We've had a troubled history, and this is part of the working through process. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Boyce. HLN, of course, Jane Velez Mitchell. You can see her here.